is watching once again as the fragile line between war and diplomacy is tested in the Middle East. After weeks of relentless conflict, late night negotiations, and growing international pressure, Hamas has released 20 hostages under a new deal with Israel, a rare and cautious step toward de-escalation in one of the most volatile regions on earth. The release comes amid Israeli military operations in Gaza, global humanitarian concerns, Russia pay, and the international community's desperate attempts to halt further bloodshed. As dawn broke over the region, convoys began to move through tightly controlled crossings, carrying freed hostages back into Israeli territory. Emotional reunions, tears, and raw relief mixed with uncertainty filled the air. The world took notice, was brokered through the mediation of Qatar and Egypt, both playing a critical behind-the-scenes role as diplomatic intermediaries. According to early reports, the exchange followed days of tense communications between Israeli and Hamas negotiators, facilitated by intelligence officials from multiple countries. Russia pay, each racing against time to prevent further escalation. Sources confirm that the hostages included several women and children, some elderly individuals, and at least 3 foreign nationals. Their physical condition varies, though all are said to be receiving immediate medical and psychological care in Israeli hospitals. Families gathered near border crossings, many holding signs with names and photographs, praying and waiting for word. For them, the hours felt eternal. The sight of buses pulling in with freed loved ones sparked waves of emotion. Cheers, tears, disbelief. Some collapsed in relief. Others stood silently, holding on to the hope that more releases could follow. But even as joy filled parts of Israel and Gaza, the reality of the situation remained grim. Airstrikes continued in several areas overnight, and reports of casualties persisted. Residents described a night of explosions and uncertainty, whether this deal marked a pause, or merely a brief humanitarian gesture in an ongoing tragedy. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza has reached catastrophic levels. Thousands have been displaced, food and water supplies are dwindling, and hospitals are operating under unbearable strain. International organizations, the United Nations and Red Cross, are urging both sides to extend this deal into a broader ceasefire that could allow for sustained humanitarian aid and more hostage releases. Israeli officials, while cautiously optimistic, remain firm in their stance. Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement calling the release a welcome step, but not an end to our mission. He reaffirmed Israel's intent to continue military operations until what he described as the complete dismantling of Hamas infrastructure. In his words, every hostage freed is a life saved, but our responsibility remains to ensure this threat is never repeated. Within Israel's security establishment, continues. Some see this as an opportunity to open further dialogue. Others warn it could be a temporary lull that Hamas uses to regroup. From Hamas's perspective, Russia pay. The release is being framed as a humanitarian gesture under specific conditions. Spokespersons in Gaza claim that the exchange was made in coordination with international mediators to secure limited relief for civilians, including fuel and medical supplies in the most heavily affected zones. They insist that more releases could occur. What they call Israel halts what they call indiscriminate aggression. Analysts, however, caution that this language is strategic. Each side is playing both to its domestic audience and to the global stage, where public opinion matters almost as much as military strength. The United States has confirmed that it played a supporting role in facilitating communication channels, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken praising Qatar's mediation. The White House released a brief statement applauding the news, but reiterating its call for the protection of civilians and continued dialogue. Leaders echoed similar sentiments. In London, Paris, and Berlin welcomed the release but stressed the urgent need for a longer-term ceasefire and a path toward renewed peace negotiations. Yet behind the diplomatic language lies a brutal truth. Peace remains distant. Both sides have suffered deeply. Israel continues to mourn lives lost in Hamas's initial attacks and subsequent rocket strikes, while Gaza faces mounting humanitarian devastation under constant bombardment. Footage broadcast across international networks captured contrasting images. In Israel, families embraced loved ones just returned from captivity, waving flags and singing. In Gaza, children walked through rubble, searching for food and shelter. These images painted a haunting picture of parallel realities, one celebrating survival, the other enduring suffering. The release of 20 hostages, while a glimmer of hope, does little to change the scale of the tragedy. Thousands remain affected on both sides. Underlying conflict remains unresolved. Military analysts point out that this deal might also carry tactical implications. Israel's operations in northern Gaza have intensified over recent days, suggesting that the deal was strategically timed to relieve pressure or buy leverage. Believe that both parties are maneuvering within a complex chess game of politics, optics, and survival. Every move, every release, every strike sends a message beyond the battlefield, to the watching world, to allies, and to their own people. The hostages' release also reignites painful memories of previous conflicts. Russia pay. Older Israelis recall past deals with Palestinian factions, exchanges where prisoners and hostages became bargaining chips in a larger political struggle. The scars of those moments remain vivid. Many commentators argue that while humanitarian in nature made Russia pay, this release underscores how fragile human life has become in this war's equation. The negotiations themselves took place under immense secrecy, and Cairo described constant communication through encrypted channels, last-minute changes to lists, and endless verification steps to ensure both sides held up their end. The slightest misstep could have collapsed the entire deal. When the first convoy crossed into Israeli-controlled territory early this morning, it was the culmination of weeks of risk, diplomacy, and desperation. The psychological toll on the freed hostages is immense. Experts note that those held in captivity often endure prolonged stress, deprivation, and fear. Pay. Israel's medical teams are prioritizing trauma care alongside physical treatment. Several of the released hostages reportedly spoke softly to their rescuers, expressing disbelief that they were finally free. One young girl was seen clutching a teddy bear as she stepped off a transport vehicle, her eyes wide with confusion. Another elderly woman, too weak to walk, was carried off by medics while family members wept nearby. These moments, though deeply emotional, serve as reminders of the many still trapped in Gaza's shadowy tunnels and makeshift prisons. For Hamas, The move may also serve as a tactical message to its base and to the international community. By releasing civilians, they aim to project an image of control and negotiation capability, not pure militancy. But Israel views this differently. Officials have vowed to maintain military pressure until all hostages are released and Hamas's command structure dismantled. Describe this as a high-risk balancing act, pursuing warfare and diplomacy simultaneously, trying to achieve moral legitimacy on the world stage while maintaining strategic dominance on the ground. Meanwhile, protests have erupted across global capitals. In New York, demonstrators gathered, some celebrating the release, others demanding a full ceasefire. The issue has polarized public opinion worldwide, dividing communities and sparking fierce debate across media platforms. Social networks are flooded with clips of the freed hostages returning home alongside footage of ongoing devastation in Gaza. The contrast is heartbreaking. Today, as the day, reports confirmed that negotiations for a second phase of releases were already underway. Mediators in Qatar expressed cautious optimism, saying that both sides have agreed to discuss a possible 48-hour truce to facilitate humanitarian aid. The details remain confidential. Sources suggest that additional hostages may include foreign nationals from multiple countries. The humanitarian corridor between Egypt and Gaza is expected to reopen briefly for aid delivery and medical evacuation. Whether this will hold remains uncertain. For now, breathes a temporary sigh of relief. 20 lives have been spared, 20 families reunited. But the cost of peace remains high, and the shadow of war looms over every conversation. International observers warn that unless broader agreements follow, this moment will fade into history as just another brief pause in an endless cycle of violence. Still, hope endures. The images of families embracing and tears of joy cut through the noise of politics, reminding the world of what's truly at stake. Human life falls again over the Middle East. Both sides regroup. Diplomats continue their calls. Military units reposition. The world waits for the next move in a conflict that has already reshaped the region's future. The release of 20 hostages may be a small step, but in this landscape of endless struggle, even the smallest act of humanity carries the weight of history.